Welcome to Book Tour. Two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. I know that in the previous episode when we talked to Paul Tremblay, we promised that the next thing you'd be hearing is an interview with Matthew McBride, the author of The End of the Ocean. And sadly, that's not going to be the case.
Well, wait. It could very well be the case, though. So nothing happened. He didn't blow us off like other authors recently did. Nothing fell through. We didn't get into some kind of fight. We had some issues, and Rob's going to kind of explain to you what happened and maybe how you can hear that episode.
Yeah, so we've been having issues with the services that we use to record our voices. So we've been trying some new things, and one of the new things that we tried was it presented some challenges with kind of the finished audio for the conversation we had with Matthew McBride, which I gotta say, awesome conversation. But there was enough audio lost that it wouldn't make sense as a start to finish conversation. So it just didn't feel right to make it an episode. But I am very willing to cut together the stuff that is listenable and make it available for people to listen to if they want to, kind of as just bonus stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it together. I'm going to post it up on our Patreon, but I'm going to post it up in a way where whether you contribute to our Patreon or not, you will have access to it.
But while you're there, it doesn't get much easier. If you've already that's not the whole point of this. We just couldn't put it out as a proper booked episode. I agree. Fascinating conversation. Great guy. I look forward to talking to him again. We've kind of committed that it's not going to be, 4 years from now and he has another book out. That's a guy I think we're going to find a reason to have on sooner rather than later. So definitely hit up the Patreon page for free. Look at that. While you're there, consider spending some of your hard-earned money, like $1 a month or so, supporting the podcast. That would be awesome of you.
Yep. So apologies that didn't go quite as planned, but, in the next couple of weeks that will pop up on Patreon. We'll post links to it so that everybody knows it's available. But for this episode, we're actually going to be talking about the book Wanderers by Chuck Wendig, the massive tome that we had to take extra time to read, and that's why you were getting interview episodes. So here's the bio for Chuck Wendig really quick for anybody who for some reason hasn't heard of him. He is the New York Times bestselling author of Star Wars Aftermath, which we reviewed, as well as the Miriam Black thrillers, which we reviewed, the Atlanta Burns books, which we did not review, and the Heartland YA series, alongside other works across comics, games, film, and more. A finalist for the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer and the co-writer of the Emmy-nominated digital narrative Collapsus. He's also known for his popular blog TerribleMinds.com and his books about writing. He lives in Pennsylvania with his family.
No stranger. We're no stranger to Chuck Wendig's work, as Rob mentioned. Sixth? What's this? Seventh book we're reviewing?
All right, so we reviewed 6 Miriam Black books. We reviewed the Star Wars book, and we reviewed Zeros. So that, by my count, this is the 9th time we're reviewing him.
8th?
Well, we did 8. We
okay.
We already reviewed 8.
I got you. Yep. Rob is the mathematician on this podcast. 9th,
if you're clicking in the background, that's my abacus.
That's a record, right? I can't imagine there's anybody we've even come close.
No, I think Stephen Graham Jones we reviewed 7 books from. So this is definitely, I think he's the one that we've done the most for.
For sure. And this is also the second longest book, maybe only beaten by 1Q84.
Yeah, 1Q84. Yeah, it was in the 900s.
Three Musketeers was close. I think that was in the 700s. So yeah, we've put a lot of time into Wendig. Here's what we're going to be talking tonight. The synopsis for Wanderers. Shayna wakes up one morning to discover her little sister in the grip of a strange malady. She appears to be sleepwalking. She cannot talk and cannot be woken up. And she is heading with inexorable determination to a destination that only she knows. But Shayna and her sister are not alone. Soon they are joined by a flock of sleepwalkers from across America on the same mysterious journey. And like Shayna, there are other shepherds who follow the flock to protect their friends and family on the long, dark road ahead. For as the sleepwalking phenomenon awakens terror and violence in America, the real danger may not be the epidemic, but the fear of it. With society collapsing all around them and an ultra-violent militia threatening to exterminate them, the fate of the sleepwalkers depends on unraveling the mystery behind the epidemic, the terrifying secret that will either tear the nation apart or bring the survivors together to remake a shattered world.
Little update. I did a little research while you were reading that. We did have both of the familiar books that we reviewed, which were 880 pages each. 1Q84 was 944 pages. So yeah, this is like fourth place, which is kind of insane.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and to be fair, the familiar books, like those were a lot of pages with not a ton of words on them.
Sure.
So I mean, from a word count standpoint, this is still, I think, I'm pretty sure in the top 3.
Yeah.
1Q84, on the other hand, was not an enjoyable book to read. I just want to say that it's not commentary on this book. I just want to say that like 1Q84 comes up in our personal conversations as like a, I don't know what that's called. Like when you give something another name.
Like a nickname?
No, like when when like someone, like a coworker, screws something up, so then you use their name and you'd be like, "Oh, you Olsen the shit out of that, didn't you?" Like 1Q84 is almost used that way around this podcast. So our history with really long books, not so hot.
A little mixed. So we'll see how this one fares. A lot of stuff going on in that synopsis, and the fact that this is like an 800-page book should indicate a lot of stuff going on in this book as well.
Yeah, we're going to try to be respectful of not spoiling this book. But as I was reading through the synopsis, I realized that like one of the biggest parts of it isn't mentioned. So we're going to tiptoe around some things. We might get a little bit ahead of where we'd like to be, but we're going to try really hard not to spoil this for anybody who's interested in reading it. That being said, the synopsis starts off pretty close to the beginning of the book. I guess we could start a little bit before that. We get kind of a prologue that a meteorite has passed in the near vicinity of the Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's neat because it's like talking about how the history of other like asteroids and stuff that have passed nearby, or comets. I guess comets. And
might have been a comet. It was probably a comet.
Yeah, it was a comet. Like history of other comets that have been like Hale-Bopp was discovered like in the 80s or 90s or whatever. And that was the Heaven's Gate. Do you remember that? Like we were
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'm a little older than you. I remember it really well. Like how weird that shit was.
I think I was kind of a cocky teenager, so I more made fun of it than tried to understand it. So yeah, the prologue is a comet is discovered by this woman. It kind of reflects on other similar discoveries, and then she has an aneurysm the night it passes over and dies, I think. So interesting prologue. But then it jumps into Shayna, just like the synopsis kicks in. Her little sister is walking, I'll lay it out. Shayna goes to her little sister's room first thing in the morning to do something. Her sister's not there. She's like, oh, that's weird. She like kind of looks around the house, doesn't see her, looks outside, and her little sister, Nessie, is like walking down the driveway barefoot. She thinks, oh, this might be a prank, goes out to talk to her, and that's when she discovers that Nessie is unresponsive and is walking in a way that she really can't stop, and so she starts to freak out about it.
Which is a fair reaction on her part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty fair. And that's how we start to discover as in the synopsis, the sleepwalking epidemic. So we'll go a little farther. Sleepwalkers cannot be stopped, meaning that they cannot be deterred from moving on a path from point A to wherever their end point is, which is something you do not discover for, maybe ever, but it's not clear where they're going. in the event that you try to stop them, so Shayna tries to stop her sister, shakes her, whatever, they become, when I say agitated, not agitated like you'd be agitated if I tried to stop you from doing something, but agitated in a way where they're shaking, they're kind of violent, trembling, and they can heat up a considerable amount, like they start to get really hot, and essentially it becomes evident very quickly that you are going to do some very serious harm by, you know, doing something as simple as like trying to grab one by the wrist and trying to hold them back. We'll go a little bit more into sleepwalkers so we can maybe not keep bouncing back and forth. They don't stop. They don't sleep. They don't eat. They don't drink. And it seems like they may be impervious to you know, I'll throw it out there. Things like needles. This comes up pretty early on. You know, as they try to sedate Nessie, they find out that her skin can't be pierced by a needle.
So, I think I started reading this before you. I'm not sure, but when I got to the end of the first chapter, my thought was, man, this chapter was so good that you could put that out as a short story in promotion of the book, because it just sets the tone for a really personal, because it's like a girl and her sister going through this unexplained situation, a very personal story that's like kind of scary and tense. And that first chapter, man, was just, I was like, this is probably one of the best short stories I've read in a long time, even though it was just a chapter in a book.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The setup is strong on this one. So, quickly we discover that other sleepwalkers will join Nessie at the rate of one every few hours, and they all have the same thing. Nessie is the first and kind of the leader, and they all kind of fall in next to her / behind her and continue on. So obviously we're seeing this develop mostly through Shayna's eyes, but through the involvement of EMTs and police officers and some other things. We switch back to what I will call likely the other main character, if you had to break it down to two. As this is still in development and there are just a handful of sleepwalkers, we're introduced to Benji Ray. Benji is used to work for the CDC. He was a doctor until he ran into some troubles and was asked to leave and is persona non grata around CDC anymore. But he's approached by a woman named Sadie Emeka? Sure. And she is, according to Rob's notes, Rob's very detailed notes. Rob does a great job with notes, but he has exceeded his note-taking ability on this one. She is a neural engineer who works for a company called Benix Voyager. And now we're probably going to go, into spoiler territory. And I only say that because we're going to cover like a pretty big component of the story that's not in the synopsis. And really, I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting this kind of branch off into the storyline, so I'll kind of pass it back to you a little bit to introduce the other big character in this book.
All right. So Benji and Sadie are introduced to the story because there's an unexplained phenomenon that's causing, these sleepwalker people to do things that are, out of the ordinary, and they're trying to figure out what's causing it, because it doesn't seem like it's something that people are doing by their own will. So the CDC is brought in to check things out. Benji, because of some of his previous history, even though he's got kind of a tarnished past, and the the thing that's introduced by Sadie and why she's a neural engineer is because the company that she works for has created something that essentially is like Turbo Siri, I guess. Like it's I guess you would say, I guess for the sake of ease, I'll call it like an AI. But like if you ask you could ask it to do stuff for you, or it could provide information based on like having a very like vast wealth of knowledge and access to records and information. So she is kind of the head of that project with her work, and she works closely with the CDC, and that's how they kind of all get introduced. I know that was very awkward, but it's just a weird thing. It's not like I'm like, oh, this is Bob. He works at Home Depot. He's got a family. This is something that's like not real, so it's a little difficult to introduce.
I think and not to take away from what you said. I think the way to introduce it's the AI that we're constantly warned about, right? Like the one that like starts to figure shit out without you asking it to.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Black Swan is the AI. I don't remember if you mentioned that or not.
I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Black Swan is the AI, and essentially the setup is this. When Benji asks, well, why me? There's plenty of great people at the CDC. I'm a disgraced, doctor for them. Like, I'm lucky getting, like, consulting gigs now or whatever. And she says, well, basically, the AI, Black Swan, asked for you specifically to help with this problem. So we probably won't go much more into that. And I know it's not in the synopsis, but I feel like it's this other huge component of the story. So far we've got, we're following somebody who's with and very close to one of the sleepwalkers, and that's how we're seeing a good portion of the phenomenon that's occurring. We have, and we'll get into this a little bit, but of course the CDC gets involved, and we've got this former CDC doctor who's brought onto the case, right? So that's how we're trying to determine what the issue is that's causing this. And then there's like this big third component, which is this AI that can, has access to all the documents and all the records and can do a statistical analysis of like the average age of sleepwalkers and stuff like instantly, but then also kind of can figure out some shit on its own too.
Yeah, and that's where it really kind of shines in the beginning of the story is like Benji's trying to figure things out, and he's looking at what is the gender breakdown, what is the the breakdown of ethnicity and stuff like that, and it's just way easier for that Black Swan to do it than to have a member of the team gather documents and then like break down the data. So I guess I should say that for the most part, the entire story is very linear. It even breaks down by dates. Like some chapters, I don't believe all of them, but most chapters would have like a date of what's going on. It starts sometime in June and it moves on from there. And so kind of as this group of sleepwalkers continues to grow, the group of people who love them, who are freaked out and trying to protect them, also grows. And so as the phenomenon becomes more of an established thing and people start to get used to the idea, the sleepwalkers are kind of generally referred to as the flock. And so the people that are with them, the loved ones who are afraid for them and want them back, become the shepherds. And so we're introduced to, I'm not going to go in, there's so many characters that it would be crazy to go into a bunch of them, but there's several members of the flock and the shepherds who are named that kind of have significant roles throughout the book. But that's the group that you probably see the most of, is the flock and the shepherds and their interaction with like the CDC and stuff, especially at the beginning of the book.
You did such a detailed job with the notes that I'm looking at these names and I'm like,
yeah.
Who the fuck is that? So I could tell you were doing it on the fly because you thought like this guy might be around for the whole book. And then, this Robbie Taylor guy, I'm like, yeah, I vaguely remember that guy. Like he doesn't figure prominently too late into the book. But yeah, so on the inside, on the actual inside of this whole sleepwalker thing, like I said, we get a lot from Benji and from Shayna, and then they're peripheral characters. There are other people who work for the CDC. Shayna is, not just dealing with her little sister being a sleepwalker, but, her dad is a character, and, there's some relationship stuff going on there. And then the rest of the story is told kind of interestingly through what the rest of the world sees, right? So each chapter is introduced with a little snippet. So it could be a Reddit post. It could be some tweets that someone put out. It can be a quote from a CNN anchor, that type of thing. So we're starting to see, what the rest of the world thinks about this that aren't, within spitting distance of the sleepwalkers. And then we're introduced to the opposition, which is mentioned again in the synopsis. So there is a militia that it becomes a militia over the course of the book. At first, it's some people, right, that are unhappy with this whole thing. So we kind of get their take on it. And then there's a preacher that figures pretty prominently into it. He's kind of a preacher, just kind of a pastor rather, kind of doing his thing, trying to keep his church running. He's got family and, some family issues that he's dealing with. And he gets kind of inadvertently dragged into the spotlight to be a spokesperson for people who are anti-flock. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. Yeah, there's a group of people that, and not necessarily a group as in they all are working together, but there's a type of person who thinks that, whether it's a religious thing or just a they're not like us thing, that like thinks that this flock of sleepwalkers is somehow intended to harm the country or the people of the country. And so those people with their common interests find ways to speak out against and maybe definitely act out against the flock throughout the course of the book.
Interestingly enough, there are a couple of characters who make zero appearances in this book, but are actually pretty important characters, and that's the current president of the United States, not the current president of the real United States, but in the course of this book, and the challenger to the next presidency, who really are mentioned enough that they play pretty big roles, but they never make an appearance anywhere. I don't even think there's. I think maybe it's mentioned that there's the one where the president makes a speech, but really it's people talking about the speech that the president made. And
it's all secondhand.
We're never seeing it. So that was kind of an interesting take on doing the outside picture, as like I said, I kind of started calling it. I don't even know if that's the right word, but so that we definitely have two things that are going on. There's people in the know right there at the heart of it, and then there's everybody else in both stories. We get the stories told to us through both sides, I guess.
Yeah. So there's not. So it's definitely like a third person, omniscient type of narration, because we see things from, like Livia said, tons of different perspectives, we see things from the third person omniscient perspective about what's going on with different characters. So we have a real bird's eye view of what's going on. And yeah, like that's probably, I'd say, the setup, all of like getting like the pieces that we're talking about kind of assembled and moving in the plot. Maybe, that's the first third of the book, which, I mean, the first third of the book is, a few hundred pages, so that's a lot. But after that, it's just like, that means that we're not talking about like 500 pages because we're going to spoil stuff. But that's it, man. That's the zoomed out view is you got your flock and your shepherds. You got the CDCs trying to figure out what's going on with them. And then you've got the people who are freaked out and thinking that like this flock was sent to destroy our way of living. And you've got, an AI that knows everything. Well, not knows everything, but knows a lot of stuff. So that's thrown in the picture as well. That's really the setup, right?
That is very much the setup. There's one more character I want, and we're welcome to talk. I mean, just because you did such a good job with these character notes, but the one other character I want to talk about, and I guess I'm not sure. I get the feeling that this character was supposed to feature a little more prominently in it than it came across. But the reason I said that too, I was struggling trying to find my place. It's actually at the Kirkus Reviews starred review, which appears above the synopsis on Amazon. It says a decadent rock star is like the first person listed. So we do have a rock star who's aged, and he's your very typical rock star, drugs and sex and rock and roll. It's a character who I really, really enjoyed, Pete Corley. I don't know why I feel like maybe Pete was meant to be a bigger character than he was, and I don't know if it's just because of his personality in the book, but I mean, he's kind of a tertiary character. I don't even know if he's a supporting character, but I feel like, and I think the Kirkus starred review kind of felt the same way, like he was a bigger character in the book than he actually was.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, well, first of all, like, I guess I could have kind of sat back and asked myself, why did he include all the people he did, which I didn't give myself the time to think about. But, like, yeah, he does play a significant role, and I think it's like you'd never know in a situation like what's explained, the terrifying, secret that'll tear the nation apart, glue the survivors together, blah, blah, blah. You don't know who's going to, play a significant role in that. And this is a very unlikely character, regardless of whether we say what side he kind of is on, because you don't think about like a rock star, like ego-driven dude being in the mix of a story like this, but it was a character that, had it not been in the book, I think the plot would have suffered for it.
Yeah, we'll talk about. I think we're going to talk more about him in spoiler talk.
Oh yeah,
which is going to be, I feel, lengthy this time, just based on the fact that like we said, we just talked about 150 pages of an 800-page book. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that Rob and I are going to toss around. Are there any other characters you really want to talk about? I mean, there is Rob has notes on, I think, 25 characters. And it's a lot. And some of them, like I said, fell off to the wayside pretty quickly or are brought up as a, key part of the story. And then, like they really don't figure that significantly into it. Anybody else you want to talk about before we move on from characters?
I mean, kind of. So one of my favorite characters in the book is someone who doesn't show up often, but her name is Marcy Reyes, and she's a former police officer that has a kind of unique attraction to not attraction in like a romantic way, but just like she's drawn to these sleepwalkers in a way that it doesn't seem like anybody else in the book is. And so she starts out being introduced as someone who has like debilitating pain and issues from when she was a police officer and was attacked while on duty, and basically like her head beat in with a bat. And so like she starts out the book as a very pathetic and pitiful kind of victim character, and by the end of the book it's entirely different, and her character is just so endearing. And I don't know, it was another thing that probably we'll explore more in spoiler talk, an area of the book that kind of like the Pete Corley character, I wouldn't have necessarily expected this character to be part of this story, but she added a lot to it.
Agreed. So we have I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, because it's like a during apocalyptic kind of situation going on in this book, right? Like there's a post-apocalyptic feeling to a book that's not post-apocalyptic, if that makes sense.
I mean, you could just say apocalyptic.
You could. I guess that would be during apocalypse, wouldn't it? Apocalyptic book. Told through the eyes of many characters, and to be fair, as you said, from a narrator, not first person, not but we get to see a bunch of different sides of this, including the media, the general public. I'm not going to quote what you call this group in the notes, but in the opposition group to the sleepwalkers. And I mean, I don't know that we can say anything else about plot.
No, probably not.
So I think this means it's time to go to spoiler talk, because there we can say things about the plot, and I feel like there's stuff that needs saying.
All right, if you are a supporter of us on Patreon, head on over and check out the spoiler talk for this. If you are not, this is probably going to be a significant spoiler talk, and this is one of those stories where the real meat is in the stuff that we can't talk about, more so than most, because I mean there's a lot of book that we haven't talked about, and there's things we haven't even mentioned that are crucial to the story. So $1 a month gets you this spoiler talk, and it gets you like the 42 other books we've done spoiler talk for, because I recently cataloged all that information. There's hours and hours of it. So for $1 a month, it is just a steal. So head on over to patreon.com/booked. Check it out.
And we're back. from a decent sized spoiler talk. Probably not our longest. Probably in the top 5, I would say.
Yes, I could go to a document, but I'm gonna just go ahead and keep the train rolling here.
Rob and I debated some things. We pretty much fell exactly where I think we both expected on some things in this book, which is it's the double-edged sword. Right? It's the nice thing and the bad thing about reading so many books with someone and then discussing them at length that it becomes predictable. Both mine and your perspectives become predictable. So I don't know that we hashed out a ton or that we came to a ton of conclusions, or at least, we're able to sway one another. But it's there, and if you've read the book, you should listen to it. And if you haven't read the book, most of it probably won't make any fucking sense anyway, let's be honest. So, that's it, right? Like, nothing else to talk about? We just need to do some wrap-ups?
Yeah, I can. You want me to get started?
You can, yes.
All right, so this book came very, very, very hyped up from practically anybody who I had seen who read it or pretended to read it, just to, be sensational on social media. A lot of hype, a lot of very positive responses to this. And so when I was going into it, I already have a favorable feeling about Chuck Wendig's work in general. So, I loved all the Miriam Black stuff. The book Zeros was interesting. And so when we reviewed Zeros, we got a taste of, some non-supernatural Wendig writing, which I think kind of prepped us, at least to a little degree, with checking out this book. That being said, like I said, that first chapter is such a great stage setting for the story that was told. If you look at it from the story perspective of Shayna, if you look at it as it's a Shayna story, I think it was a fantastic book. It happened to be a lot bigger than that. And so with a book that's 800 pages, you'd be hard pressed to enjoy everything that happens. And so there were some things that were, to me, I don't know if I want to say extraneous, but just didn't do it for me as much as other parts of the book. That being said, overall, I thought it was very well done, and his character development was good. Where it kind of falters for me is just where the story ended up going, and the explanation for some of the things that were going on just weren't exactly what I was hoping they would be. And so I kind of just had a basic difference of opinion with the author on where I would have thought it would be cool to see the story go. But Chuck didn't call me up and say, "Hey, Rob, I'm writing this story. Where do you think it should go?" He wrote the story he wanted to, and I totally respect that. So overall, I found it a very entertaining but very long read. I didn't have some of the objections that I read online and that Livius have, but they were conspicuous enough for me to think, oh, Livius is going to be pissed about this several times throughout the book. So while it didn't necessarily take me out of the story, it made me aware that it might not be doing so much for other people of a different kind of ideology, or whatever you want to say. All right, I've been rambling. I enjoyed the book, and I thought it was a really cool story with some interesting stuff, and it really kind of challenged me to think deeper about the overall message. And you don't get that with every book. I think it's 4 stars.
This one is so tough to talk about and give a rating to. If I wasn't doing this podcast, I think there are people I would recommend this book to, and then there are people that I wouldn't. I don't even know how to form my own opinion on this, which is terrible, right? So I'll go into what I can. Overall, I thought the story was really interesting, and some very interesting things happen in the story. There's a part very deep into the book, climax part, that I was like, oh, this is fucking brilliant. So there are moments like that in the story where I was super, super impressed. I've always thought Wendig is a good storyteller. Where I run into an issue with this book is that although the book is, it's clearly fantasy, it clearly takes place in what I would say is the very near future, and it expounds on some things. So we talked about it in the review, so I'm not going to be around. You got the AI stuff, like stuff that doesn't exist to the level it is in this book. So I go, okay, he's exploring some things that exist, but, are in their infancy, and he's taken them, leaps forward or whatever. Based on some of that, I had some issues with, because it's based in science, even if it's science in its infancy. I had some issues there. I had some issues with the direction of the story, and how it played out. And I'm not being vague on purpose, and this is not a pitch for you to go to whatever, like we jokingly pitch, you go to Patreon, spend $1. Like I talked about it in spoiler talk, some stuff that I thought, kind of like Rob said, not the same things that Rob thought, that should have gone in a different direction that would have made this more interesting. And then there's the part that Rob did address, which there are a minority, 20%, give or take, I'm looking at the Amazon reviews, that thought that the book was a little politically heavy-handed. I don't like politics in my fiction. That may sound like a dense kind of thing, and I could see if you're telling a story. So science fiction does this a lot, right? They tell this big story, and they point to political things, but that's not what happened here. You're just kind of like bludgeoned with the politics through the course of the story, and I just don't find that enjoyable. If I want politics, I'm happy to turn on CNN or Fox News or whatever and get my politics there. I don't enjoy it in my fiction books. I don't know that it did, well, I could say, for me, it didn't do anything to advance the story. And it is what it is. It took me out of the story a little bit here and there. Still, this is an epic book that covers a fairly epic progression for humanity, for science, for a variety of things. So it's so tough because in some ways, I think he pulled it off. It's the way that he got to pulling it off that kind of bothers me. So, that being said, I'm going to go like right down the middle, and I'm going to give this one 3 stars.
Oh, that's pretty much exactly where I thought you were landing on.
See, that's what I said. We're just too predictable. Here's what happened. We've decided after 8 years, we're too predictable. Earlier, what did you say? Something. Oh, you were talking about us trying new things. That's the same thing that couples do, right? They get in that kind of lull. Yeah. 8 years in. So instead of like, me putting on a strap on or whatever, we're just trying new recording software. But that's what happens to people who have been together for this amount of time. We become boring and predictable, and then we try new things. Those new things fail, like the technology we've been using. But yeah, this was a tough one, man. Like I said, I don't, if I didn't have to put a number on it, if you just asked me, hey man, did you finish that book? And I'd go, yeah. And you go, what'd you think? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like that would be my review to someone asking me if I didn't have to like kind of give a summation and give it a rating and stuff. It's tough because in some parts it's great and in some parts not so great. So.
Well, it's obvious you've had a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
I feel like I have talked the least in an episode this time than I have in a long time. It actually did occur to me, and because like not to an extreme degree and not in a way that ever has any negative impact on how we feel about each other, that, it's pretty obvious we have, disparate political affiliations. And for a second, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I presented Livius's case and he presented mine? And I didn't suggest it because I just thought, like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know. But, like, that to me would be like, how much do I understand Livius? And what, because, like, as I was reading the book, I knew the stuff that was going to, like, not sit well with you. So it was just a thought I had. I thought it'd be interesting.
Yes, and comical, likely. I would imagine that it. Well, that's the problem. I think it would turn into a farce too quickly,
right?
For both of us. I'm not just accusing you of that. I'm I would put on my hippiest, like hippie-like, I guess, not hippiest, like hippie-like hat, right? And I'd go to town and I'd do a Bernie Sanders impersonation the whole time, you know, and then you'd do whatever. You know what I mean? So, right. I look, man. Chuck wrote the book Chuck wants to write. And that's all that matters, right? People are going to have mixed opinions. Look, man, we looked at the reviews. What'd you say it was like 80% 5-star? Was that, you did some math on it, right?
Yeah.
65% 5-star, 13% 4-star. Look, people really like this book. I didn't dislike the book. I disliked elements of it. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. thankfully, the next book that we're reading, I don't think covers any of these types of things, and is entirely different approach to a story. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. So we are doing. So one more thing before we get to that, because something else occurred to me when I was trying to figure out what the current word for post-apocalyptic is, which, oh God, sometimes, man. So we read The Fearing, the book 1 by John F.D. Taft.
Yep.
And that guy wrote a post-apocalyptic book that's broken up into four books that are still going to come out to like less than 800 pages. So
Yeah,
like talk
probably
about two different approaches. Yeah. So he's got 500-page book broken up into 4 parts, and Wendig throws down an 800-pound brick.
Yeah.
And I
really
get
did.
it. I think that probably has to do more with the publishing company, than it does with, I doubt Wendig tried to break this book up into 3 books, but he could have done it pretty easily at that size. But it's funny that just almost back to back we read books that could have, both kind of touch on the same type of thing, but are presented dramatically differently.
Yeah. And this is not too long from now, we're going to be reading Rob Hart's The Warehouse, which is an absolute like expose of an issue, I guess. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that one. But before we get to that one, we're going to go back to a guy who we've had live reading from. We've reviewed one of his books, two of his books. Yeah. Only very, very different. Drive-Through Crematorium. So John Bassoff's books were a little offbeat and weird, but they weren't published by Eraserhead Press. And that's probably all you need to know about a book, right? Like,
yeah,
if it's published by Eraserhead Press, you have a pretty good idea that you're going to get some weird and crazy shit. Now, oddly enough, Rob has already read this book. I can't even get into how weird that all is.
Let's pause on that for a second, because I want to go into I finished reading Wanderers before Livius did. B, I finished reading Drive-Through Crematorium before Livius finished reading Wanderers.
Yeah. In my defense, it's a short book. I did start it. I'm like 33 pages in. I will tell you that I understand the title right now, if that tells you kind of where I'm at in the book.
Yep.
But I think I get the feeling there's not going to be a lot of like the sociological like discussion. I don't know. I've still got another 150 pages to go or something, so who knows what's going to come up. But looking forward to that one. And then immediately after that, right? No, we decided not immediately after that. 2 weeks after that, The Warehouse. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But both of those are definitely coming up. We're also going to try to get Rob Hart on to talk about The Warehouse before he forgets about us little guys. Before he rockets to stardom. So that's what we've got coming up the next few weeks here on Booked.
All right. Just because this just happened, I think, within the last day or two before we're recording this, did you watch the 2018 Halloween movie?
I did. I went and saw it in the movie theater, and I only say that because that's a big deal for me nowadays to actually go see a movie.
And you were kind of on the fence or wishy-washy about it, didn't care for it too much?
So my brief review of it is we erased, most of the history of Michael Myers to tell a story that takes place, 30 years later or whatever it is, and I just felt like it deserved more than it got.
Well, it's getting more. I don't know if it's going to be more of what you want, but it was officially announced. I think Comic-Con is, because Comic-Con happened, all of this stuff's coming out. Not one, but 2 more movies. One next year and one the year after. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends were announced.
I did not hear this. I'm hesitantly excited. I was really excited for that last Halloween movie. Dude, I don't know how many times I watched that trailer beforehand, and the trailer is what I wanted from that movie, and it's one of those. I felt like it was one of those things like, oh, they always put the best parts in the trailer. I don't typically think that, But I was like, yeah, they literally took every good part and put it in the trailer, is how I felt when I walked out of that movie. So I'm down. I'm down for both of those. I mean, it's only another 4 hours of my life I have to give to this, right? So I'm down for checking both of those out for sure.
Well, and the funny thing is, because like you had seen it and you had a kind of a lukewarm response, I felt less, compelled to watch it, and I didn't watch it until it came out in like VOD or whatever, and I fucking loved it. Like, it's one of my favorite movies that I've seen recently, and I've watched it several times. I bought it, all that kind of stuff, and I really enjoy it. And so does Jesse Lawrence. Like, we both have kind of a mutual love for that movie, and so like this is actually a pretty exciting announcement for me that they got 2 more coming. It's the same people, so it's like it's still the same director, David Gordon Green. It's still got the same writing team and everything, so it should be, I guess, at least tonally similar.
I don't know what Jesse's excuse is, but can I ask you, what is your relationship to the Halloween movies?
Well, that might be part of it.
As I said, I know Jesse's seen all of them, I'm sure, so I don't know what his excuse is. I almost feel like I mean, really followed the vast majority of them through the years. You know, I mean, they started to get really weird after a while, so
No, I hadn't really ever seen them until more like in the last couple of years. I watched the original one. I think I watched the original one when the 2018 was announced, just to like kind of get background on it. I think I saw the H2O one when it came out, but it was more like people were watching it and I was with them. It wasn't like there was no intention behind it, and that's probably it. Like I don't have much of a background in it. Okay. At all, so I don't have all of the emotion poured into other things that are then disregarded.
See, oddly, I really, really liked H2O, and I was in the minority. I mean, I don't know what like the Rotten Tomatoes score on it is. I'm gonna look it up, but I know that I really liked H2O, and that was not the consensus view for that movie. So,
well, it was hyped up because it was Jamie Lee Curtis coming back right after her not being in. The other continuity or whatever.
52% is the tomato meter, and the audience score 49%. Like I said, I really, really liked it. So
yeah, excited about that. Oh, and I figured out the other thing I wanted to mention that I'm very excited about is there is now a trailer and a date for season 2 of Mindhunter, the Netflix show.
Oh yeah, I watched that. I was it seems like it was more than a year ago, right? Like,
yeah, it was. I think it was late 2018.
Okay, yeah, it feels like I like maybe I thought it wasn't coming back. Like I knew it had been renewed, but at some point I was like, man, it's been a long time.
You should check out the trailer because it seems like it really ramps up, like the crazies a little bit, like because they've kind of set the tone in the first season, which was a lot of like establishing the characters. Now it seems like there's more interaction with like the killers and stuff, and it brings back like Ed Kemp and stuff like that. Edward Kemp, whatever his name is, the fat guy in prison, who was awesome.
I'll totally watch that. I enjoyed the first season. It's not exactly what I expected, but I found that I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, it started in October 2017. So yeah, 2 years. Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I said. It seems like it was like I knew they'd greenlit it, but then it's like I didn't hear anything, and I was like, all right, maybe that got shelved quietly. And I don't have anything else. There's some new Indian horror TV series on Netflix that's supposed to be terrifying. I might try to get into that in between some of these books. I just caught an article, one of those. I'm sure it's just clickbait. Like people are having trouble sleeping after seeing this. That kind of thing. So,
so you're not excited about the sequel to Zombieland?
I not that long ago someone mentioned that to me, and I actually was like, I don't know if I saw it or not. Like I feel like I might have, but like it didn't make a big enough impression on me to actually remember. So I'll go with no, because I don't even remember if I saw the first one.
Oh, Takashi Miike's got a new movie coming out called First Love.
Oh, all right. I'm down for that. That guy does some weird shit. I'm totally in on that.
Yeah. There's just some stuff.
Yeah, the TV show I was talking about is an Indian horror show called Typewriter.
Nice.
like made in India. So,
But not Bollywood, like
no, yeah,
not
it's
that style.
I don't believe so. It's an Indian horror drama directed by Sujoy Ghosh. It's about a haunted house and a haunted book that stir the imagination of a group of young wannabe ghost hunters and a dog determined to capture the ghost that plagues the notorious home in their neighborhood, and so on and so forth. Shit goes bad, I'm guessing. Yeah.
That's a good setup.
Yeah, so maybe by next week I'll have a little review of that too.
Awesome.
All right.
Very good.
We'll be back next week with Drive Through a Crematorium from John Bassoff. Until then, I'm Olivia Snedden.
Now I'm Rob Olson. Keep reading.